So we're going to begin, and I want to welcome everybody and thank you all for joining us tonight. And we have some faces I haven't seen in a while. It's nice to see you all, some that we see more often than others, but it's really nice to see everyone. And most importantly, a early happy Purim. This is the season of joy. It's the season of happiness. And we are in the month of joy leading up to the most joyous day in the Jewish calendar, which is the holiday of Purim, which begins tomorrow night and continues all through Friday. And the holiday of Purim is a real representation of what joy should look like throughout the entire year. Now, when we think of the holiday of Purim, and you'll excuse me for 1 second because I'm getting a message saying that it was incorrect. Try again. It is. Did anyone else have an issue getting on?
No.
I think everyone was able to get in. I'm gonna send it again. So the holiday of Purim is the holiday of joy. It is the holiday when we celebrate the salvation of the Jews at the hands of Ahasuerus and Haman in ancient Persia. And the story of Purim, which has many incredible details and lots of incredibly what might seem coincidental, but truly are miraculous turns of events that led up to the final salvation of the Jewish people who were at threat of being annihilated. And we celebrate this as a holiday of joy. And the main focus of the day is to be happy. Shira Rachel, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you were able to get in.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties.
Not a problem. So this day of Purim is actually a small microcosm of the entire year. And when we truly understand what Purim teaches us about happiness, we can take those lessons and create lasting happiness throughout the entire year. And I'm sure that different people have different memories or favorite things that they like to do on Purim. For those of you who are celebrating Purim more recently, you might be gaining new experiences. For those of you who've been celebrating Purim for years or all your life, you have, I'm sure, many, many memories of different events that happen throughout Purim. But the Torah gives us guidelines, actually written in the Megillah, of the mitzvot that we do on Purim. And in case you're ever wondering what those mitzvahs are, I'll give you a quick hint. They all start with a letter M, or the Hebrew letter Mem. They all start with the same letter, and they are all connected together with different ways of feeling happiness and feeling joy. So what are the mitzvahs of Purim? How do we celebrate Purim? We know that there are different customs that we have. I'm sure many people are either planning a costume or at the stage of having kids planning a costume or seeing kids in costumes or seeing adults in costumes. Costumes is a big part of Purim. And it's not just because of the fun and the exciting and the outrageous aspect of it, but it actually has a very big, deeper meaning to the costumes. We know that we have the delicious Hamantashen, that is the traditional Purim food, the triangle cookies with a filling hidden inside. These are all customs. And all of these customs relate to the concept of something being hidden. A costume hides your identity. The hamantash hides a filling. We also have a custom to eat kreplach, which are basically Ashkenazi wontons, which also have a filling hidden inside. The concept of something being hidden is a central theme in the story of Purim. And the reason for this is because the entire story of Purim is actually hiding the true hero of the story. Now, who is the heroine of the story? We know that our heroine of the story is Queen Esther. Esther was a Jewish woman who was drafted, for lack of a better word, to become queen. It was against her will. She was taken to the palace and she was chosen as queen, even though she did not want to be a queen, to King Ahasuerus, a very evil, conniving, and non-Jewish man who she was not allowed to be married to according to Jewish law, but she was forced into this situation. And she saved the Jewish people from her position in the king's palace. And Esther's name, the name Esther, as she is called in the Megillah, and not only is she called this name in the Megillah, but the actual Megillah that we read on Purim is called Megillat Esther. It is the scroll of Esther. It is her story. The name Esther means hidden. It is the meaning of when something is concealed. Now, Esther is the obvious hero of the story. It is obvious that she brought about the salvation. But we know that who really is the one who brought about the salvation? God. Hashem is the one who saved the Jewish people. Hashem is the one, God is the one who granted us our salvation. And yet, God is completely hidden. When we read the Megillah on Purim, you will not find God's name mentioned in any part of the Megillah. Now, usually, books of the Torah are full of God's name. We have God's name, and God has many names in many different forms throughout the Torah, our prayers, in the Psalms. We always have God's name, and yet we do not see God's name anywhere in the Megillah. We don't even hear mention of God in the Megillah. The Megillah is written, and we read it as a story. It's a story that happened, a series of events, a chain of occurrences that happened one by one. This happened, which led to this, which led to that, which led to that. We don't hear any miracles. We don't see anything supernatural. We don't see any obvious intervention on God's part. It's just a very nice story that happened to take place in the perfect time. Everyone was in the perfect place at the right time, in the right moment, with the right opportunity to bring about a salvation. Which, if someone was looking at the story of the Megillah purely from the interesting history, it would be very easy to completely ignore the fact that it was a miracle and that it was really God, because God is completely hidden in the story. But that's exactly the point of Purim. This is why the first and most important mitzvah on Purim is to listen to the reading of the Megillah. Not only is it the important mitzvah of Purim, we actually do this mitzvah twice. We read the Megillah 2 times. We read the Megillah on the evening of Purim, which this year will be tomorrow night after nightfall. And again, during the day of Purim, we listen to the entire reading of the Megillah. Now, for those of you who are unaware of the idea of reading the Megillah, we read the entire story of Purim written in the Megillah in the Hebrew. It is read by it. You do not have to be a specifically ordained rabbi to read the Megillah, but you do have to be able to read the Megillah properly with a correct tune and with an actual kosher Megillah scroll, which is similarly written to a Torah scroll, and which is why most people will go to a synagogue, or there are many open outdoor Megillah readings and different places to hear the reading of the Megillah. And the Megillah has to be read. You have to hear every word. which is interesting because you got to hear every word, but not one of them is God's name. It's not like you're missing a word because you might miss God's name. No, God's name is not in the Megillah, yet you need to hear every word. Why do we need to hear every word, but God's name isn't even in there? Because God can be found hidden within every single word. Because godliness and holiness and miracles were hidden within the natural looking chain of events. If we look at the story of Purim starts off with King Ahasuerus making a great big feast. He invites everyone because he is celebrating the grandeur of his rulership. And he's celebrating the fact that there was a prophecy years ago that the prophecy was that the Jews would rebuild the temple after a certain amount of years. And in his calculation, that amount of years had already passed. The temple had not been rebuilt. He was the current king ruling over the Jews. So he was celebrating the fact that he won and God lost, or so he thought. What he didn't realize that he had miscalculated the years and the temple would soon be rebuilt after his downfall. So he made a great feast and he invited everyone. And at this feast, he wanted some entertainment and he invited his queen, Vashti, to perform and flaunt her beauty, unclothed, at the height of immorality for everyone. What happened when they summoned her to the palace? She was actually, now there are many people who think that Vashti was a big hero because she refused to perform undressed in front of her husband and all of the country. But the fact of the matter is she was thrilled and happy to do it until she looked in the mirror and saw an outbreak of pimples. And that's when she refused, not because she had such a moral high ground, but because she refused to appear in public if she looked less than perfect. So yes, you might say to yourself, wow, that's amazing that she had this acne breakout at just the right moment. But we know that it was really God making her refuse, which would lead to the fact that at the party, the advisors are so upset. How could it be that Vashti refused to come before the king? If all the women see that the queen refused her husband, well, they're going to stop obeying their husbands. And therefore, Vashti was put to death. And King Ahasuerus was so drunk that he agreed to the fact that his wife should be killed, which led to him needing a new queen, which in turn led to Esther being chosen as queen. So you might think to yourself, wow, isn't it amazing? Naturally, it just happened that the king happened to choose a girl who was Jewish. And so later on, when the Jews are in danger, the queen, she has connections with the king because, she is the queen after all, and she'll be able to save the Jews. It wasn't just a happenstance. This was God putting the idea into Ahasuerus' mind that Esther is the one who should be his queen. And therefore he said no to women who were far more beautiful and far more provocative and far more attractive physically, because God was the one putting Esther in the palace. And when the two servants of the king, Bigtan and Seresh, plotted to poison the king, and Mordechai, the sage, the Jewish sage who would very often sit at the gates of the palace, overheard them talking about their plot to poison the king. And Mordechai was a member of the Jewish court, which required him to understand 70 languages. And so he understood the language that these two guards who were plotting to poison the king were speaking, even though it was not a local language that anybody else understood. And Mordechai sent a message to the queen, who happens to have been his niece, quote unquote. And therefore, Mordechai is recorded in the King's Book of Chronicles as having saved the king. Did he just happen to be there? No. God miraculously put him in this place and had the guard standing in the spot where Mordechai was so that Mordechai would hear, Mordechai would save the king. And many years later, when the Jews are under risk of being annihilated because Haman, who had risen to power and was very, very much full of hatred for the Jews, very full of hatred for the Jews, and he wanted to get rid of all the Jews. Why did he want to get rid of all the Jews? Because he made a law that everyone in the land had to bow to him. Every time he walked through the town, everyone had to bow to him. The problem was he walked around with an idol around his neck. So Mordechai refused to bow to him because we don't bow to idols. We only bow before God. And Haman was so filled with fury against Mordechai, who was rebelliously not bowing to him, he decided he wants to kill Mordechai. He wants to kill all the Jews because of Mordechai. And when he is going to come to Achashverosh's palace and ask for permission to hang Mordechai on the gallows that he had built, who is Achashverosh going to be reading about in his book of Chronicles at that moment? The story of how Mordechai saved the king. At that moment, just as Haman was walking in to ask for permission to hang Mordechai. Did that just happen to be that that's the page that Achashverosh was reading at that moment? Of course not. It was all from God. And if you don't know the whole Purim story, I think by now with these few situations, I have whet your appetite to listen to the Megillah and hear the entire story. Because this story is an amazing, amazing chain of events that ultimately led to the Jews' victory. No Disney movie can compete with this story, let me tell you. It's impossible because it is all from God. God is the one hidden within every natural occurrence, every daily event that happens throughout the story. And this is the first mitzvah of Purim, to listen to the reading of the Megillah. Why do we need to hear the entire story of the Megillah? Why do we need to hear about it? Because every moment of our lives, we also have God hidden behind the curtain, making miracles for us, orchestrating events so that everything happens perfectly according to his master plan, which ultimately leads to our best, which ultimately brings us our own salvations, our victories, our successes. And this is the first step to maintaining and finding and keeping lasting happiness. Recognizing the fact that everything in life comes from God. Everything that happens is from God. And it's very easy to say thank God when things look good. When something goes your way, you say thank God. Because you hopefully appreciate the fact that the good things that we have come from God. But the reality is that everything that God does is good. The problem is that we don't always see it as good. Sometimes God hides the goodness in challenge. But when we really believe and we remember that every single thing that happens is from God, just like the Purim story is hiding God in every moment of the story, our life is hiding God from every moment of the story, then we are also able to experience joy throughout our life, because we're always aware of the fact that whatever moment I am going through, whatever is happening to me now, whatever situation I find myself, it is from God, and there is inherent positivity, and there is something good that I can experience within it, and it is good for me, even if I don't feel like it. When a child is sitting in the doctor's office and they're about to get a vaccine and they're not happy about it, do they really feel like my mother loves me? My father loves me? No. They don't feel like it. But if a child would really understand that, why is my parent doing this for me? Because they want me to be healthy. Then even if they do not enjoy this moment, they will still be happy because they know and appreciate that my parent is keeping me healthy. Challenges for us in our lives is exactly the same thing. God is putting us in a difficult challenge, and there will be a good outcome whether we see it or not. It's there because everything that God does for us, he does out of love. He does with positivity and goodness, and has a bigger picture in mind. In the Megillah, we do not see God's hand openly. But if we look at the big picture of the story of Purim, it is so clear and obvious that it must have been God's hand orchestrating these events. Because how else could everything have happened so perfectly to result in the Jews' salvation? It must have been God's plan. But we don't see our entire lives as the big picture of the Megillah. We see our lives as the small event that is happening right now, the experience that we are going through right now, which is why the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, in order to fulfill the mitzvah, you need to read the entire story. You can't pick and choose. You can't just read one chapter. You can't just read two chapters. You need to hear the entire Megillah in order to properly fulfill the mitzvah. Because this helps us understand that our life, if we look at it like the entire Megillah of our lives, we will recognize God's hand even in the challenges, because we will see how it is part of the big, beautiful picture, the gorgeous tapestry that God is weaving for us, which is our lives. And that is the first secret, the first method of discovering happiness. Really recognizing God's hand in every moment of our lives. And that is the first mitzvah of the Megillah. So like I said, the topic of tonight's class, discovering lasting happiness through the 4 mitzvot of the Megillah, this is secret number 1. And we learn it from the mitzvah of the Megillah. Mitzvah number 2 is the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Mishloach Manot is the mitzvah which many people are aware of. Many people have already started doing this mitzvah. And many of you have already received our Mishloach Manot. If you haven't received it yet, it is on its way. In our house, we start early and we end late. So if you might have gotten it a few days ago, or you're getting it soon, or you might get it a few days after Purim. But what is the mitzvah Mishloach Manot? We deliver or share or give packages of food to those around us. And the actual mitzvah, in order to complete the mitzvah, it has to be done on the day of Purim. And there is a minimum of 1 person you need to give to, and in the package should be a minimum of 2 different types of food. That is the minimum requirement for the mitzvah. So sometime on Friday, everyone should take 2 foods, hand it to somebody else, and you have fulfilled the mitzvah. However, there is more to this mitzvah than just the basic requirement of the law, which is why we start already before and we continue even a little bit after. What is the meaning of sharing food? And to clarify, the mitzvah is not to give gifts. It's not Hanukkah. We don't do presents. We do food. Why are we sharing food? What is this idea of sharing food? What is the idea behind it? Food is a basic necessity of life. It's something you need to live. Now, you don't necessarily need wine and chocolate to live, although will just say it is quite a necessary thing, which is why we personally usually give wine and chocolate. I think they're just the mainstays of life. I'm not a drinker, but I'm definitely a chocolate eater. But food is a necessity. In fact, in order to do the mitzvah, the food that you give has to be something that is ready to eat. So if you give a tea bag, that is not fulfilling the requirement because you can't just eat the tea bag. It has to be something that if you are hungry right now, you can eat it or you can drink it. Why is this? The idea of food being a basic necessity of life, and that is what we share, helps us understand the importance of being there for other people when they need it most. When someone is hungry, that is the most basic challenge and the deepest difficulty that a person can have is when they're hungry and they don't have food. And when we share food with others, we are really demonstrating the idea of when you need me most, I am here to support you. I am here to share with you what you need the most, what your basic needs are. Now, that doesn't mean that in order to fulfill the mitzvah, you have to give it to someone that is hungry. There's another mitzvah for that. But the idea is, I have your back. You need food, I'm here to share with you. And this is something that actually brings us the most happiness. When you know that you can be there for somebody else, when you're there for someone else when they need you, and you know that there is somebody there that is there for you when you need them, that brings true happiness. Knowing that you have a support system, that you have someone who is there to help you with your basic needs, someone who is there for you whenever you need them, that brings true happiness. That gives us the feeling of when I'm down and I am not able to find my own happiness, there will be someone there to lift me up. And for those of us who are lucky to have people as a support system for us, we are very blessed. And for those who don't, it is so important to find that. And the way to find it is to be that person for someone else. The best way to be supported is to support others. The Torah doesn't tell us the mitzvah is to receive baskets of food. No, the mitzvah is to give the baskets of food. Don't worry about, do I have someone who will give to me? Focus on what you can give to others. Because as soon as you focus on, I can be there to support somebody else in their basic needs, automatically this feeling of support will be reciprocated. And if it's not reciprocated, then find somebody else to support. But the best way to feel happy is knowing that you have someone there for you when you need them most. And that is what we learn from the mitzvah Mishloach Manot. So when you give Mishloach Manot on Friday, and everyone should give at least 2 things in a package, and it doesn't have to be a fancy package. It could be as fancy as you'd like or as basic as you'd like, because it's not about the aesthetics. It's about the substance. And that is the idea of being there to support somebody else. Not that you say, oh, I hope everything's okay. Oh, how are you? Oh, how is your day? No, it's not just about asking the questions. It's about listening to the answers. It's about being there to support those around us and being there to provide the basic needs for those who don't have or for those who need. And automatically that gives us the support system that can bring us lasting happiness. I heard something really beautiful. Somebody once said, when I am feeling down, and I can't bring myself up, I find somebody else to bring up. I find somebody else who's down, pull them up, and automatically I get pulled up with them. When this woman shared this, it was so eye-opening to me, because sometimes we just can't pull ourselves out of a rut. It's just hard. We're in a bad mood. It's hard to find positive things, even though we know that God is with us and we know that everything is for the best. Sometimes it's hard to do that. But it's very easy to spot somebody else who's down. And sometimes it's easier to help somebody else become in a better mood than to focus on our own mood. But when we are focused on somebody else and giving them support, without even realizing, we realize how much happier we are. Because by helping somebody else and bringing somebody else up, by supporting somebody else with their basic needs, that brings us lasting happiness. That brings us true joy. And this is what we learn from mitzvah number 2, Mishloach Manot. On a very similar concept, actually tying the two ideas that we just discussed together, is the concept which is connected with the third mitzvah, which is matanot le'evyonim. Matanot le'evyonim is another word for tzedakah, charity. And specifically what it means, giving gifts to the poor. Now there's a big distinction between Mishloach Manot, which is giving gifts of food, and Matanot Le'evyonim, which is giving gifts to the poor. Mishloach Manot, we give food. It doesn't have to be to a poor person. It should be to a friend, to someone that we are connected with, someone who could use a boost. Matanot Le'evyonim is actually funds that is given to people who are lacking the money they need. There are many organizations who specifically give money either for food, to those who need money, to those who need basic necessities. And in fact, the mitzvah is to either give to a poor person or to give to an organization specifically for that purpose. As a side note, for those of you, if you'd like, for those of you who do not have anyone specific that to give the money to, on Purim, for Matanot Le'evyonim, my husband does distribute food to those in need. And if you want, I can send you a link. You have to do it on Purim day. And if you specify in the notes what the money is given for, if you write Matanot Le'evyonim or Purim charity, it will be not used for any organization or any synagogue or anything like that. It will be used specifically to give money, to give actually meals that are distributed, that my husband distributes to families who need that. If anybody needs, that is one of the ways to fulfill the mitzvah, and it should be done on Purim day. But what is this idea? What is the meaning of giving money to poor people? What is this concept? So the truth is that charity, the word for charity in Hebrew is tzedakah. However, if you look at the word tzedakah in Hebrew, we translate it as charity, but it actually means justice. Tzedek means justice. What does that mean? That giving charity is not just a nice thing to do. It's actually the just thing to do. It is a necessary right thing to do. Why is that? God gives money to different people. Some people he gives a lot of money to. Some people he gives less money to. Now, obviously, we need to work in this world. God doesn't have money raining down. I don't know anybody who has yet to come across their bank account just expanding miraculously. We do need to work. However, there could be people who work equally as hard and put in equally most effort, sometimes even in the same field, and some are more successful than others. Some are richer than others. Why is that? Because God is the one who at the end of the day decides how much money we have. And when God deposits money in our bank account, some of it is for us to keep, and some of it is for us to share. So we're not saying, I have a lot of money and I'm going to be really nice and share it with other people. No, God is the one who gives us the money, and God is the one who tells us to share that money, which means that we are only the conduit for giving this money to those who need it. In fact, we are really, by giving charity, the channel through which God is giving that money to the poor person. So the money is going to get to that person. The question is, are we going to be lucky enough to be God's channel of blessing? What does that tell us? That every single thing that we have comes from God. Now, that doesn't mean we should just give everything away. God does give it for us. God wants us to appreciate what we have and share it with others. So matanot la'avyonim, giving to the poor, helps us recognize and realize that everything we have comes from God and is there for us to share with other people. And when we live in that frame of mind, we appreciate everything that we have. And this brings so much joy. Lasting happiness comes through appreciation for what we have. Pirkei Avot teaches us, the sages, the ethics of our fathers, which is part of the Mishnah that teaches us ethics and morals on how to live our lives. The Pirkei Avot teaches us, Ezehu Ashir, who is rich, Hasameach Bechalko, the one who is happy with what he has. What brings happiness? When we appreciate everything that we have. When we appreciate what God gives us and we are sharing it with others, that makes us happy. Because if we wait to get something in order to be happy, we'll never actually be happy. And even if we are happy, the happiness will be very fleeting because automatically we're waiting to get the next thing. If you can only be happy if you get something, then as soon as you have it, you might be happy for the moment, but it doesn't last because now I want something else and I need that thing to be happy and I need this to be happy and I'm waiting to be happy. And if this happens, then I'll be happy. But no, how about because I have this, therefore I'm happy. Because God gave me this, therefore I'm happy. Because I received this, therefore I'm happy. Then we can always be happy. Because there is always something to be thankful for. And there is always something that we have that we can share with somebody less fortunate than us. When we look at other people and compare ourselves to other people and say, oh, I wish I had that, we'll always find someone who has more than us. Guaranteed. You will always find someone who is richer than you. You will always find someone who is younger than you. You will always find someone who is older than you. You will always find someone who is wealthier, more beautiful, skinnier. Whatever you're aiming for, you will always find someone who has more. Always. But if you're also looking, you will also always find someone who is less than you, someone with whom you can share. And when we say to find someone who has less than you, that doesn't mean to look down on them and therefore say, oh, I'm so happy, at least I'm not like them. No, it means find someone who I can share with. No matter how strapped I am for cash, I always have a little bit that I can share with somebody else. No matter how little you have to eat, there's always something that you can share with someone. No matter how down you feel about yourself, there is always a compliment you can give to someone who's in a worse mood than you. There's always something you can share with somebody less than you. And if you focus on, I always have something to share, and there is so much that I have that I can appreciate, then we can always be happy. And this is what we learn from the mitzvah of matanot la'avyonim. The mitzvah of giving a gift to someone who has less than us, because then we appreciate everything we have. So this mitzvah of giving charity, of giving to those less fortunate than us, is a minimum you have to give to 2 people, but you don't have to give a lot. The minimum requirement for fulfilling the mitzvah is to give 1 coin, which means if you give $1 to a homeless man on the street and another dollar to another homeless man on the street, you have fulfilled the mitzvah. And this is something that is so basic. You don't have to give a lot. But automatically, when you look at someone and say, I have what to give them, you appreciate everything that you have. And this brings so much joy. Because if we look around and look for things to be appreciative and thankful for, there is so much to be appreciative of. And there are so many opportunities to find joy. And this is what we learn from the 3rd mitzvah, Matanot Le'evyonim. And finally, we have the 4th mitzvah. The 4th mitzvah is the mitzvah of the Purim feast. Now, the Purim feast, which in Hebrew is called the Mishteh, again, they all start with the letter M. We had the Megillah, Mishloach Manot, Matanot Le'evyonim, and the Mishteh, the Purim feast. And the Megillah tells us something very interesting about the requirement for celebrating at the Purim feast. First of all, so that everyone knows, in order to fulfill the requirement of the Purim feast, it is, in order to make it an actual meal, it is a requirement to wash your hands for hamotzi and have bread. That's what makes it a full meal. But it should be food that you enjoy eating, and it should be food that you find festive, whatever it is for you, it should be something festive. And the Megillah gives us a very interesting requirement of what you should do at this meal. You got to drink. Now, not only do you have to drink, you know how much you have to drink according to the requirements? You have to drink so much that you're so drunk that you can't tell the difference between Mordechai and Haman. What does that mean? That you can't tell the difference between Mordechai, the tzaddik, the great sage, the rabbi in the story of Purim, and Haman, the evil villain in the story of Purim, which basically means that you can't tell the difference between extreme good and extreme bad. That's how much you got to drink. Seriously? The Torah is condoning getting so drunk you can't tell the difference between good and bad? That's number 1. Number 2, the mitzvot of the Megillah are supposed to be accessible for everyone. Not everyone can drink that much and be healthy. And the Torah always wants us to be healthy. There's nothing in the Torah no mitzvah that tells us that is an unhealthy thing to do or that is a dangerous thing to do. And that kind of sounds a little dangerous. Now, there are many people who take this literally, and I am not a fan of drinking. So I don't appreciate the literal application of this mitzvah. But what does it really mean? What does it mean to get so drunk that you don't know the difference between good and bad? So let me tell you what it means. It means not drinking wine and alcohol that you can't tell the difference between good and bad because you're so drunk. No. It means being so focused on joy that you cannot tell the difference between good and bad, because even negative things in your life seem like good things in your life. That you're so drunk on God, that you're so connected with holiness that even when the challenges and the obstacles and the difficulties in your life come, you find the good. You can't tell the difference between good and bad because you're so focused on how everything comes from God. That is what it means to be so happy on Purim, that you can't tell the difference between good and bad, because to you, everything that God does is for the good. And that is the way to find happiness. Not differentiating between this is good and this is bad. This is Mordechai and this is Haman. This is positive and this is negative. No. Everything in life, I can find the positive, because everything that happens to us has positives and negatives. And if we want to find the negative things, even in the goodness in our lives, we'll probably find it. Even in the happy occasions in our life, there's always negative things that we could focus on. What does it mean? It means that we focus on the positive. We find the positive opportunities. We look for the good in everything. And we don't know the difference between good and bad because we don't even focus on the bad. We find the good in every situation, which brings us back to the idea of the Megillah, which brings us back to the idea of God being hidden in the Purim story, that God is behind everything in our lives, and that everything in life can be perceived to us as positive or negative, but we don't make that differentiation because we find the positive, we find the godly hand in every aspect of our lives. And how do we celebrate this Purim Mishta, this Purim feast? Not alone. We should gather with friends and family. We should gather with our community, and it should be a festive meal. Why? Because when we are feeling like it's hard to find the positive, we have our community, we have our support system, we have the people around us who can lift us up, who can encourage us, and that we can lift them up, that we can encourage them, and together we can create a unit where we are all there for each other. Now, this year, the Purim Su'udah for some of us might look a little different than usual. If being with a community is not possible because of COVID regulations, which is why, by the way, our Purim Su'udah, which is at 4:30 on Friday, will be held outdoors for all those who are comfortable. We will have Megillah reading then as well. But even if you're not with the entire community, find someone to celebrate with. Find someone to share this festive meal with. It could be family. It could be a friend. It could be someone that you're each sitting in your own house alone over Zoom. Whatever it is, be there with somebody else so that together you can find the positivity and you can lift each other up, which again brings us back to the other ideas. So the real way to find lasting happiness is, number one, recognizing that God is the one behind everything. Number two, sharing our most basic self with somebody else, being there to support other people and bringing them up, and that in turn lifts us up. Number three, finding those to share what we have with and appreciating the things that we have. And number four, always focusing on the positive. Not differentiating between good and bad, but becoming so drunk on happiness, drunk on godliness, drunk on holiness. And if you need a little alcohol to help you get there, it's fine too. But focus on the positive, and that you don't see the difference between good and bad because you find the good even in the bad and transform the negative situations into positive situations. And then there's really no difference between good and bad because even the bad can become good. Even the difficulties can become positive situations. Even the challenges can become opportunities for growth and success. And these are the 4 mitzvot of Purim. And these are the 4 secrets to lasting happiness. And we openly celebrate them on Purim. We do these 4 mitzvot on Purim. But when we do them on Purim, it's not just about doing the act of giving food, of giving charity, of eating a meal, of hearing the Megillah. It's about internalizing the message so that even when Purim is over, the message of these 4 mitzvot can last us through the entire year. The message, the holiness, the beauty, and the method of living our lives, of finding happiness and joy, can last long after Purim. And believe me, when Pesach is coming, preparing for Pesach is not always the most joyous time. The holiday of Pesach is beautiful and joyous, and we're going to learn a lot about it, but it could be a very stressful time for many people. But when we focus on the joy and the happiness and the positivity and being able to share that with other people, that takes a happy day and makes it longer than the 24 hours of the holiday, because it makes it something that we can really drag into the rest of our year and extend the joy of Purim into the rest of our days, into the rest of our lives, until the next Purim, we're already so happy because we've internalized the entire message of Purim. So these are the 4 mitzvot of Purim, and I encourage everyone to definitely observe these 4 mitzvot, do them physically, the actual mitzvah on the day, Thursday night hearing the Megillah, Friday doing the 4 mitzvot, whether in your own home, out of your home, wherever you are, but also, and even more importantly, internalizing the message that each of the mitzvot of the Megillah, of the Purim story, each of the mitzvot of the Purim holiday give us and teach us and help us experience, so that we can bring these lasting happiness as a happiness that will last, as a happiness that will get us through the rest of our lives, as a happiness that will help us through the rest of our days, and a happiness that will help us bring the world to not just the 4 M's of the 4 mitzvot of Purim, but the 5th M, which is Mashiach, the coming of Mashiach, the time when we will not have to find positive within negative situations, because the entire world will recognize openly God's hand in everything. We will not have to live in a world where God is hidden, like in the Megillah, and we need to search and find him, but where God will be openly revealed, where we will see and recognize and feel and be able to touch and look with our own eyes and say, this is God, this is positive, and we won't have negative, we won't have challenge, we won't have struggle. And this is the world that we are waiting for, that we are working towards. But until we get there, we need to create it in our own lives. So when I wish you all a happy Purim, I don't only focus on the Purim. It's not like you're saying, happy Monday, but you're really just trying to say it's Monday today. Have a good one. No, not happy Purim, happy Purim. It's Purim, but really it's about being happy, because Purim is a day that will come and go, but the happy has to stay throughout the year.
Amen.
So everyone, a happy Purim, a happy before Purim. And as a side note, tomorrow is actually a fast day. We celebrate the fast of Esther, which we commemorate the fact that Esther fasted before coming forward towards the king to ask the king to save the Jewish people. She fasted and she engaged in prayer. The Jews also fasted before they went out to war, which they emerged victorious. And we commemorate these 2 fasting episodes in the Megillah by fasting tomorrow for those who are able to fast or limit our treats. And we will definitely make up for it with the festive meals and the delicious treats and everything else that comes along with celebrating the holiday of Purim. So the fast actually starts tomorrow morning. I will post in the group the time when the fast starts for those who are able to, and we break the fast after reading the Megillah on tomorrow evening, right after sundown. So ladies, I wish everyone a happy Purim. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. And for those who want any further information, I will post the details of the 4 mitzvot and a link to further information. If anyone needs help finding a Megillah reading near them that is as COVID friendly as you need it to be, we will be having Megillah reading at the Sholem Benita on tomorrow evening. It will be indoors. Masks are requested. For those who are uncomfortable with an indoor Megillah reading, you are welcome to join and listen from outside as well. If anybody needs something closer to where they are, feel free to message me and I will give you the information to a Megillah reading near you. And wherever you are, you can definitely share a Mishloach Manot package with somebody else. You can definitely have a festive meal. And if you are unable to physically give donation to poor people, message me. I can send you a link to donate online. We are very lucky that we have the opportunity to give money, which will actually be given to a poor person on Purim from the comfort of our own home with a credit card. And as there is no minimum amount for the Matanot La'Evyonim, as long as it is enough to give to 2 people, which I guess means that 2 cents is the minimum. So everyone is encouraged to do these 4 mitzvot. And as we said, most importantly, to internalize the message of these 4 mitzvot. Laura, you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the beautiful presentation that you made. Thank you. And I wanted to ask I guess I was Googling to see if I could find a Megillah that I could read.
Okay, so in order to read the Megillah, women are allowed to read the Megillah and fulfill the mitzvah in that way, but you would have to have a Megillah scroll that is on parchment and ink and read in Hebrew. So if you don't have access to that, I can send you an English copy and you should definitely read it. But if you're able to attend a Megillah reading where it will be read from the parchment, like a Torah scroll, that definitely is the best way to do the mitzvah. So if you want, I can let you know if there's anywhere near you. There might even be an outdoor Megillah reading. There are outdoor Megillah readings around South Florida in many different locations. So if you want, I can find out if there's one closer to where you live, if that's something you would go to. But if not, then you can definitely read it online. I could send you a link where you can print it, or if you go to any Judaica store, they sell Megillahs as well that you can read.
Okay, I'll message you. Thank
you. Send me a message if you want me to find out if there's a location near you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Send me a message so I'll look it up.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else has any questions?
So much, you're amazing.
And I would really, really love to see anyone who's able to join us Thursday night at the shul. Friday will be completely outdoors. It's in my backyard. We have, thank God, a really nice big backyard. You can come by just for Megillah reading at 4:30, or you can come by for Megillah reading at 4:30 and then stay. We will have cocktails, a bar, stuff for the kids as well, lots of delicious food. You will be able to fulfill the mitzvah of the Purim festive meal. And there will also be a lighter version of a meal so that you can still have a Shabbat dinner after. And then for those who want to stay for candlelighting, we'll have candlelighting in the house right after that at 6 o'clock for everyone who is welcome to join us. If you want to hear just the Megillah outside, there will be, like, on the outskirts of the yard, we will have more separate seating for anyone who wants to be more secluded outside. And really, everyone is welcome. If you're uncomfortable with anything COVID related and want to make sure that your needs will be accommodated, please message me and I will do my best to make sure that everything is accommodated to the best of our ability. So happy Purim, everyone.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you all very, very soon.
Happy Purim.
Thank you. Happy Purim.